Morning, everybody. This is Brother Albert, Beggar to Beggar Devotion. We are in October. Whoa, it is flying by, isn't it? It goes faster the older we get, and I look like Father Time now with my beard. I've been letting my beard grow out. I don't know how you like it. Trying to keep it nice. Okay. Well, I was wanting to talk about faith, hope, and love. But it's going to take a while to talk about faith, and then hope, and then love. The love chapter in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, at the end of that, it says here, and now these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. Well, why did Paul bring up faith and hope, and not just talk about love? So we're gonna spend some time on faith. I know I did that last week, but we're doing some more this week. I don't know how long that'll take. We're just gonna go for our 30 minutes and then keep going next week if we need to. You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure exactly what next week's going to be like. It might be that I move to Tuesday just because I'm out of town this next weekend with family, and we're going to be gone through Monday too. So we'll just see what happens. I'm taking it all with me just in case I can do it there, but I don't know. So just watch out, okay? All right. So let's start off with faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. So faith, what is faith? Well, if someone's beliefs and confidence are strong enough, they can achieve something that is very difficult. That's faith that can move mountains. If you have this look at what is a Christian faith in terms of believing, it's when you look at this, it's usually discussed in this way: believing God's promises, trusting in His faithfulness, and relying on God's character and faithfulness to act. Faith is derived from the Latin, and I think I said this last week, but I'm going to remind you. In the Latin, fides, and Old French fide, F-E-I-D, is confidence or trust in a person or a concept. In the context of religion, like our faith is belief in God or in the doctrines or teachings of religion, okay? And we'll come back to all that after we look at hope and then love and why those three are connected. But right now we're going to talk about faith. Within Christianity, faith in maybe one sense is often discussed in terms of believing God's promises, trusting in His faithfulness, and relying on God's character and faithfulness to act. Some look at it a little bit different, but we look at it through believing in the resurrection of Jesus, okay, and the agony in the garden, which Jesus states is the plan of God the Father, and we look at the Holy Trinity, but it never says Holy Trinity in the Bible. So what are the essentials of the Christian faith? Well, you have the deity of Christ, as Jesus is God. Well, Jesus never says, I am God in the scriptures. He makes it very clear to those around him, especially the Pharisees and the Sadducees, that he is God. John 10:30 says, I and the Father are one. How can you get any closer to that? Jesus was claiming deity, and interesting enough, He did not deny that He was God. When Thomas says, my Lord, my God, again, Jesus did not correct him by saying that He is not God. And then salvation by grace. We're all sinners separated from God and deserving of eternal punishment for our sin. Jesus' death on the cross paid for the sins of mankind, us, you and me, giving us access to heaven and an eternal relationship with God. I said this at the very beginning, we all go somewhere. When we die, we're either going to heaven or to hell. And God sacrificed his son so that we could be with him forever in heaven. So we have that salvation by grace. That's a faith that we have. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith. Okay? And this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. That's Ephesians 2:8-9. There's nothing we can do to earn God's favor or gain access to heaven apart from his grace. Okay? So we look at all these different aspects of faith, and we walk by faith, not sight. What does that mean? 2 Corinthians 5:7, and it says, what is it? To walk by faith, not sight. It's common to think that as inspiring as the phrase sounds, walking by faith would make a person unintelligent, sheltered, and aloof. The truth is, walking by faith means being perceptive, resilient, and engaged. Okay? You don't just sit around. In 2 Corinthians 5:7, the Apostle Paul says, we live by faith, not by sight. We walk by faith and not by sight. That's the ESV version. By we, he's talking about followers of Jesus. If you're a follower of Jesus, how do you do this? Well, looking at it for the first time, it looks like an inspiring motto, but what would it actually look like to live this way? Here's a story a guy was sharing. He said, growing up, I heard a story of a couple, nuns who worked in a hospital. They were out driving in the country when their car ran out of fuel. When a truck happened by, the driver offered to drain some gas from his tank, but he didn't have a gas can. The nuns found a clean bedpan in their car and decided to use that. After the trucker drained some gas into the bedpan, then the gas into the tank. A police officer drove by and saw what the nuns were trying to do. He stopped and said, I don't think that's going to work, but I certainly admire your faith. Not a bad joke, huh? And it's also not a bad snapshot of how much people see walking by faith. Many people admire the idea. They likely find it inspiring, but they don't look at walking by faith as something that they themselves would want to do. After all, it sounds inspiring, but it's not intelligent. Sure, there are some of the most pugnacious atheists, he says, out there who treat faith as a bad thing, like Richard Dawkins, who has called faith one of the world's great evils. But most people would say that walking by faith sounds admirable, even if it's not personally attractive. Walking by faith and not by sight sounds like one of those things that could work in the movies when the lighting and background music are just right, but you don't really take it seriously after the credits roll and the cinematic spell is broken. To walk by faith strikes us a bit like the climactic moment in the original Star Wars movie when Luke Skywalker is preparing to take his one shot at destroying the Death Star. As he nears the spot where the Death Star is most vulnerable, he's peering through the computerized scope to get the best aim when the voice of his deceased Jedi mentor says, "Use the Force, Luke. Let go. Luke. Trust me." So he switches off the computer, relaxes, and trusts the Force to guide him. It's an inspiring moment in the movie, but it's not as though the 20-year-old boomers driving home from the theater went on to close their eyes on the trip home, letting the Force guide them. So what does it actually mean to walk by faith, not by sight? Is it actually doable? Even if it is doable, is it worth doing? It's easy to read and to walk by faith, not by sight. Whatever inspirational meaning we'd like it to mean, but if we really want to see what 2 Corinthians 5:7 means, we'll need to look at the context of the verse, what comes before and after it. That's what I always taught. I was always taught that you look at what's before it and what's after it. From that context, we'll be able to explore what it means and does it mean to walk by faith and not by sight. On the face of it, walk by faith, not sight, sounds fairly unintelligent. It sounds like you're ignoring what you can see right in front of you and trying to force yourself to believe something that probably isn't true. Yet, far from being merely an emotional psych-up, faith throughout the Bible is connected to serious-minded confidence. Now, faith is confidence, what we hope for, that's Hebrews 11:1, and increased knowledge, Romans 14, 1 through 2. As we zoom out and look at the context of Paul's walk by faith, not sight, we see in 2 Corinthians 5:7 that Christian faith is on the beliefs of which we are convinced. That's 2 Corinthians 5:14. The verse before and the verse after 5:7 each say that we are confident. This is because Christian faith leads to greater bedrock confidence in the living God and not to easily evaporated elation over what turns out to be a mirage, okay? So in fairy tales and atheistic literature, faith is depicted as believing with your heart, something that makes zero sense in your brain. But for followers of Jesus, the typical experience is that biblical faith presents fewer difficulties to our minds. The existence of God actually has a ton of evidence to back it. Then to our often irrational human hearts, which I have that, which is incessantly, it works to convince us that we are smarter and more important than God. Whatever it means to walk by faith, not sight, it's not a matter of turning our brains off so as to psych ourselves up to believe what we know isn't true. And at first glance, when we look at walk by faith, not sight, sounds like something you can afford to do only if life's already going well and you don't have to worry about anything serious in life. It sounds like a pastime of the sheltered and privileged. The rest of humanity has to keep their eyes open and their hopes realistic so that they can keep putting food on the table. Doesn't that feel right? But again, listen, when we zoom out and look at the larger context of walk by faith and not by sight, we see the opposite picture being painted. Paul narrates what life is like for him and his fellow disciples of Jesus, using words such as hard-pressed, perplexed, persecuted, struck down. He writes, we who are alive are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, and outwardly we are wasting away. Meanwhile, we groan, is how he describes the interim between now and Jesus' return someday. We groan. Whatever it means to walk by faith, not sight, it doesn't mean living a blissful life sheltered from pain and trouble. So, living by faith, not sight, might bring up images of someone so preoccupied with heaven that they're not invested in making a difference here. It's true that walking by faith means fixing our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. But it's not true that this means staying aloof from others. Instead, walking by faith leads us directly into the path of people who aren't yet interested in Jesus. We implore you on Christ's behalf be reconciled to God. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 20b. Whatever walking faith by faith means, it's not a matter of staying aloof from anyone and unattached to people. Okay, let's zoom out and look at the context of walk by faith, not by sight. We see that faith is actually a matter of seeing reality as it is, whereas without faith, we see only with our physical eyes and thus can only discern a sliver of reality. Okay? Paul says that walking by faith means seeing people from a worldly point of view. 2 Corinthians 5:16. Walking by faith means having an eternal perspective so that we can feel at home in both worlds. Walking by faith, not sight, means fixing our eyes on what is eternal. So, we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Seeing what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. That's 2 Corinthians 4:18. I didn't make that up. I don't make any of this up. In the words of the journalist Marvin Olasky, in A Matter of Seeing, when we see that the world is spiritually as well as materially populated, every aspect of life looks different. That's why Christianity isn't a hobby, and why life is more than the sum of our diversions. Walking by faith, not sight, means looking beyond to the unchanging orbs of reality rather than trying to navigate our way using shifting clouds as points of references. Now, when we perceive reality as it is, we become more perceptive about what counts in life. We realize that as followers of Jesus, we can't lose whatever we face, whether we're at home in the body or away from it, alive on earth or alive with Jesus in heaven. We're going to be well looked after by God. Either way, we make it our goal to please Him. So as we saw earlier, walking by faith, not sight, was no vacation from experiencing pain and trouble. If anything, walking by faith in Jesus got Paul in way more trouble than he'd ever experienced in his life. By being hard-pressed, perplexed, persecuted, struck down, was also no reason for Paul or us to despair. Walking by faith and sight makes a person resilient when they face difficulties. I can't say I feel that resilience at times because I walk out of that faith walk. I step out of it. And I try to walk on my own. And then that's when everything just presses down on me. I'm struck down. I'm persecuted. But 2 Corinthians 4:7-10 says, but we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our